Okay, so just a quick catch up from where we were, right? Right at this point, we find Josephus in the middle of two difficult situations. To his right are Roman cohorts that are challenging him and kind of testing him, probing his forces, right? Marching from Jerusalem are his enemies within the Jewish community. They've spoken very badly of him. There's been a series of, according to his description, of corrupt behavior with the high priest, with Shimon ben Gamliel, the head of the Beis Din, the Av Beis Din, and in history one of the greats. And they've been convinced to join in with his enemy, Jonathan Gaskala, to remove Josephus from what is really his governorship of the Galilee at this point. He spent the previous year or so fortifying different towns, building walls, preparing for the war that's yet to come with Rome. And now his enemies, political enemies in Jerusalem, seem to be his much greater enemies. So he sits between these two groups. One is marching towards him from Jerusalem with, I think it's 1,000 men, and the other are about 500 Roman soldiers that are just probing his defenses where he is. Right? And the Roman fellow who's doing it is, let me just see where we are now. Okay. Oh, and he's received two letters. I'll back up to the letters if you don't mind. He's received two letters, right? He's made his base in the Ptolemies, which is up in this area here, and they're marching up through from Jerusalem up this way, right? Mm-hmm. And they sent him a first letter, right? And the letter reads as follows. And by the way, he's not sitting with by himself. He's sitting with almost 8,000 armed men as well. So which is why the Romans are just probing. They don't actually want to get into a war with him either. Yeah. Okay. I was written such a letter as this. Ioannis and those who are with him who have been sent by the Jerusalemites, meaning the political leaders in Jerusalem, to Josephus. Greetings. We were sent by the principal men of Jerusalem when they heard that Johannes from Gaskala had often plotted against you to reprimand him and to exhort him to submit to you for the duration. Because we want to deliberate together with you about what still needs to be done. We invite you to come to us quickly, but not with many others, for the village would not be able to accommodate a mass of soldiers. Now, by the way, the person who is leading this group is in fact the same Johannes of Gaskala, right? But they've written a letter saying, we understand he's plotting against you, and we want to exhort him to submit to you. But he's actually the leader of this group, in fact.
Was it internal revolt against this Gaskala?
No, it's an internal revolt. John Gaskala we've seen a few times. We've seen him a few times previously. There's a couple times where he came to visit once, and he was going to come by himself, but he had 300 men outside. And Josephus only allowed one in, and it was an embarrassment to him and sent him packing. He's kind of Josephus's nemesis, but Josephus seems to overcome him each time. But now he's gone to Jerusalem. They've gone to Jerusalem, and they've plotted against him, right? And they've sent him this letter, right? So I'm not going to read you everything that went on, but Josephus isn't going to fall for this. He's too clever. You know, come to us in this village. Don't bring any soldiers with you. The village is too small. Right? When I heard these things, I wrote back in this manner: Josephus, to Johannes and those with him. Greetings. I am pleased to discover that you have arrived in the Galilee in good health, especially because I shall now be able to pass over to you the care of local affairs as I return to my native city, Jerusalem. I have been wanting to do this for some time. I would have come to you not only at Zalath, but further, and without being directed to do so. But I beg your understanding that I'm not able to do this because I'm closely guarding Placidus, the Roman, right, at Chabolis. He has a plan to go up into the Galilee. So you have to come to me when you have read this letter. Be well. Right? So what does Josephus say? He says, you know, I'm so happy you're on your way because I wanted to give up the governorship, go back to, you know, maybe writing books or whatever in Jerusalem. And now that you're here, I can turn over the governorship to you. All is well, right? But I can't come to you because as a Jew, you know, as a leader of the force in the Galilee, I have to do what I'm supposed to do, which is protect against the Romans that are attacking at this point. Now, he knew that he actually wanted to position the Romans there. And he has these little skirmishes with the Romans where nobody's getting killed. But he seems to be somebody who's protecting the Galilee from Rome at this point. So, so they write back to him, and now the tone changes. To Josephus, greetings. We charge you to come 3 days from now without armed soldiers to the village of Gabaroth, so that we can hear fully the complaints that you have made against Johannes. Very different change in tone, right? Went from greetings to, okay, you got charges to make, you know, come to us and make them, right?
It's in order.
Right. Okay. So he writes to them, if you want me to come to you at all costs, there are 204 cities and villages throughout the Galilee. I will come to you at any of the ones you desire except Gabara and Giscala. The one is Ionis's native place, and the other is the ally of his friend. Right? So we're talking about this place here, Gabara. So just to get a sense of, here's the Sea of Galilee. Right? You can just pass them. So you can see one of the places that he doesn't want to meet with them is Gabara, right?
Yeah.
It's up here.
Oh,
All right.
yeah.
And the other is much further north, which is Giscala. Remember, we keep talking about John of Giscala, right? So Gabara is close to here on this map, and Giscala is really up north.
This is showing this map, right?
Yeah, it's north of
north of
north of that map. Right? Yeah.
Everything is in a close vicinity.
Yeah, everything is within 25 kilometers of each other, maximum. Everything is within 25 kilometers that we're talking about, right? But he doesn't want to go to the fortified location. He says, I'll come to, you can pick any of 202 locations. He tells them, there's only 2 that I'm not going to. Sorry, right? The one belongs to Johannes' native place, Giscala, right? And the other to his ally and friend, Ionis, right? So that's where we find ourselves at this point, right? So they're kind of dueling in terms of phraseology with each other, right? But so after the second letter, the one where they said, we charge you to come to us, right? That's where we'll pick up our story, right? After they had written these things and greeted the Galileans whom they sent off, they went off to Jaffa, not Jaffa, right? Jaffa, you'll see, is just below here, right? Here's Gevara. He went down to here, just a little bit back, right? Okay. Being the largest village of those in the Galilee. Now, you have to understand, he separates between villages and cities. He views the villages and the people around the villages, the countryside, as Galileans themselves. He views people in the major cities quite differently, because some of them are Greek and some of them are Roman, some of them are not Jews, some of them are Syrians, right? Some are Jews. So the city folk, he doesn't necessarily really think of as Galileans per se. They tend to be more loyal to their cities themselves, right? They're like city-states.
It's always like this.
What?
It's always like this.
Yeah, that's right.
Even today in Canada.
Yeah, it's true. The urban people don't have the same kind of sense of loyalties as the country people do, in a sense where they're understood. So he went there to this village in the Galilee. It had very strong walls and was completely full of inhabitants. The mob came out to meet them with women and children. They kept crying and directing them to leave, and not to begrudge them a fine general. Oh, sorry, they went off to Jaffa, right? Meaning the delegation went off to Jaffa, right? The ones who were marching north with their troops, right? So they showed up at Jaffa. It's hard to tell what the correct pronunciation is in here because it's a translation of Hebrew into Greek into English. So in this place is where the delegation settled in, right? And it was a place of very strong walls, and it was full of inhabitants. And they anticipated, being men of renown from Jerusalem, a positive greeting. But instead, the mob came out to meet them with women and children and kept crying out, directing them to leave and not to begrudge them their fine general, me, Josephus. Now, the people of that group were very irritated in these shouts. Yet they did not dare to reveal their anger without requiring an opinion from them. They went on their way to other villages, but similar outcries met them on all sides, crying out that no one could change their minds about having Josephus as the general. Right? Wherever they're turning, they're running into Josephus fans. Right? Okay. Ineffective among these folks, this group of the Jonathanites, so to speak, right, departed and went off to Sepphoris, the largest city of those in the Galilee. So now he's given up on what Josephus calls the Galileans, the people of the villages and the farmers, and they're going to try their hand with the urban people. And you remember in earlier stories we've told, there were people within the cities that often rebelled against Josephus, and one way or another he managed to overcome it. So they went off to Sepphoris, the largest city in the Galilee. Now the people from here, being oriented towards the Romans in their opinions, met those men, but neither praised nor insulted me. So they're city folks, and they knew, okay, we're going to stay in the middle here. We'll go with the winner at the end of all of this. Yet when they went down from the Sephorites to Asachis, those who were from them kept crying out against them, much like had happened in Jaffa. That is to say, as they're leaving, people were screaming at them, at their backs, right? No longer restraining their anger, they turned on them, and the armed soldiers accompanying them beat with clubs those who were crying out. So the Jerusalemite forces are now going from city to city trying to find welcoming. They're not. The people of Sepphoris controlled themselves as best they could until the Jerusalemites started to leave, and then they started screaming at them, right? So the army turned around and beat them. Not necessarily the best way to get allegiance, I think. always remember we're hearing this through the voice of Josephus. When they now showed up at Gabara, Jonas came out to meet them with 3,000 armed soldiers. Okay? So the 1,000 have now met up with 3,000 like-minded people. Because I had long since understood from the letter that they had resolved to make war against me, I moved up from Chabalos with 3,000 armed soldiers, leaving the most trusted of my friends in charge of the base, because I wanted to be near them, and I went to Japarta, which is 40 furlongs away, and this is when I wrote to them that and this is the letter I read you, that I'll come to any of the 204 cities and villages to meet you, with two exceptions.
So he left 5,000 behind?
It would seem so. Yeah. He's going to get them back soon. Right? When they received these letters, Jonathan's group no longer wrote back. A meeting of the friends convened, and after inviting Jonas to join them, they deliberated the manner in which they would take me in hand. It occurred to Johannes to write to all the cities of the villages in the Galilee, for in each one there was bound to be at least one person, maybe a second, who were at odds with me, and to summon these as against an enemy. So what's he doing? You have to sort of back up for 1 second and send, right? There's a small clique in Jerusalem that doesn't represent all of Jerusalem. It's like an executive council, right? That has been, from Josephus' point of view, corrupted into deciding to remove Josephus as the general governor, or whatever you want to call him, of the Galilee. Mm-hmm. And they've gathered together 1,000 men. Some are mercenaries, some are true believers, right, to fight. They have met with the major enemy, or nemesis now, of Josephus in the Galilee, right, Johannes. And now what they're doing is a very interesting maneuver. They're trying to get, from every city and village in the Galilee, people to sign a document that says that Josephus is corrupt and he shouldn't be the general. Now, they're not trying to get the majority of people in each city. They just want to get 2 representatives of each city to sign the document as if they're speaking for the city. Mm-hmm. When they finish this, right, they will take this document back to Jerusalem, right, the document that's been signed by, let's say, 500 people of all the cities in the Galilee. They'll take this document back to Jerusalem, and now this clique in Jerusalem will present to the whole council, ruling council, right, that the view in the Galilee is that Josephus is corrupt and he should be removed. Right? Then the people in Jerusalem en masse will vote against Josephus based on the opinions of the people in the Galilee. Mm-hmm. Having taken this document, right, they will now go back to the Galilee, not with a document from a small clique, but they will say, look, the Jerusalemites en masse want this corrupt general to be removed. Mm-hmm. What's your view of this? And at that point, the majority of Galileans will now, out of respect to the community of Jerusalem, will say yes. Right? So this is a version of a tactic that was used for good by Aaron HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol. He would see that 2 people were fighting with each other, and he would tell a lie.
A lie?
Yeah, he would tell a lie, actually, a small lie. He would say, Reuven, I just ran into your friend Shimon, and he feels very bad about the troubles between the 2 of you. And, you know, you guys should sit and talk. What do you think? I'll be there if you want, and we should make peace with each other, right? And Reuven would say, well, if Shimon's willing to, come to the table, we were friends for many, many years, tell him I'm willing to, too. Now Aaron goes back to Shimon. So, meeting with Reuven. Reuben feels very bad about how all this went down, and he wants to meet with you, right? And he brings them both together, right? Based on a little white lie, right?
Yeah.
That began the whole thing, but once he gets it going, they both sincerely want to meet and do this, right? Johannes wants to do the opposite of this, right? He wants to take the news of the small clique in Jerusalem, expand it in the Galilee, right? Then take the expanded opinion in the Galilee back to the mass of Jerusalemites, get them to recognize the problem in the Galilee, vote against Josephus en masse, right? Then take that news back to the Galilee, right? So this is what...
So like you're
Right.
making parallel, but Aaron was trying to do peacemaking. Here was instigating
Yeah.
the crisis.
Exactly. So they've made one mistake, and this is something that repeats with Josephus over and over and over, which leads a lot of credence, in my opinion, to believing that he's working many sides at one time. And that is that Josephus always seems to have a source in the enemy camp that delivers information to him, right? And more than that, he's very... This is something that is like excellent spycraft. He's very, very conscious of never revealing the source. In fact, misdirecting the enemy as to where he got his information.
Right.
Because he has no desire to brag. Haha, I got you. He has a desire to keep that person in place. You know, his original piece of information he claims he got from his father, who overheard something from another person, right? So, you know, obviously his father was not sitting in the council of the enemies, but his father was the one who told him how his father, it's a little unclear, right? But this is a sign of a spy master, is that you keep him in there, and then when you have to use the information you've got, you direct it as though it came from somewhere else. Yeah?
And it was for his safety also.
And the information, right, provides his safety,
Right.
having a spy in their camp. But what I'm saying is that protecting that spy with misdirection.
Network of spies, it's the most precious commodity.
That's right.
The network.
That's right. And so he protects it through misdirection. We'll see more of it as we go forward, right? So that was what his plan was. He directed that this... so it occurred to Johannes to write to all the cities in the Galilee, for in each one of them were bound to be one person, maybe a second, who were at odds with me, and to summon these as against an enemy. He directed this declaration be sent to the city of Jerusalemites, so that they, once they knew that I had been judged an enemy by the Galileans, a traitor by the people I'm ruling, by the Galileans, would themselves vote likewise. He asserted that once this had happened, the Galileans, who thought so highly of me, would become afraid of being left in the lurch. Right? Because now all of Israel, the Jerusalemites, are now against me, right? So they'll switch sides. When Johannes had eagerly counseled these things, what had been said pleased the others well. About the third hour of the night, these matters came to my attention. A certain Sakuis, which in Hebrew is Zakai, by the way, who was with them, deserted to me, and reported their design. Clearly, I could no longer postpone the time for action. Determining what a trusted armed soldier of those around me, one Yaakov, which he's mentioned earlier, was worthy, and I ordered him to take 200 armed soldiers to patrol the exits leading from Gabara into the Galilee. So he's taking 200 men. They're quietly surrounding Gabara, which is the center of the enemy, where the enemy is housed, right? And what are they supposed to do? And they are to arrest and send to me those who came out. Now, Gabara is very close to where he is, right? He's just a little bit
northwest.
Right. So send those people to me, right? Arrest them and send them to me as they come out of the city. They're coming out of the city with these documents to be signed by different villages, right? So arrest them as soon as they come out, right? Especially those caught with documents sent to me. Another one of my friends, Jeremiah, I sent to the frontier of the Galilee with 600 armed soldiers to guard closely the roads leading from there to the city of the Jerusalemites. I had also given him an order to arrest those traveling with letters, to guard such men in chains on sight, but to forward the documents to me. So this was further away. This was about 20 kilometers away as opposed to 5 kilometers
So is
away.
he feeling they're traitors?
So, what?
They're traitors? Is that...
Well, they're loyal to the Jerusalemites, but they're ones carrying these documents all over the Galilee to be signed by individual people who don't like Josephus, right? So what Josephus is doing is getting ahead of them. Whenever you see one of these messengers, either arrest the messenger and send him to me if he's only, say, 5 kilometers away, or if he's further away, say 25 kilometers, put him in chains, get the documents onto a horseman, and bring the documents to me. I'm collecting these letters, right? Before they get turned over to the villages, I'm getting them myself, right?
He's also getting the names of those people who signed them.
Well, actually, these aren't even being signed. They're actually being collected before they're signed.
Oh,
As they come
before
out,
they're signed.
the
Oh.
moment they come out of Gabara, there they are,
I see.
right? Waiting for these guys, right? After giving these instructions, and he chose very, very troops that have been names of leaders who have been proved loyal to him earlier in the book, in other skirmishes, right? After giving these instructions to those being sent, I sent word to the Galileans directing them that on the following day they should take up weapons and 3 days' food and enter the village of Gabarot to meet me. From the armed soldiers about me, I apportioned 4 units, 4-unit cohorts of about 500, and detailed the most trustworthy of them to the protection of my person. So he created for him, he's following Roman military behavior. He's sending out scouts, he's using intelligence, right? Now he's created a Praetorian Guard for himself, of his most loyal people, right? I appointed the heads of each detail and directed them to exercise concern that no unfamiliar soldiers should fraternize with them. So he's very worried that it's not so much that they'll be co-opted, but he's saying, look, you're Jews, right? And you're normally, prepared to fight with Romans. Watch out for Jewish soldiers. People dressed as Jewish soldiers. They're Sicarii. And if they know who you are, the word fraternize is a word that Josephus only uses one other time. And he uses it to describe the Sicarii in the city streets of Jerusalem. When there's a gathering, they would fraternize within the gathering, pull out their daggers, kill an enemy quietly, and step away from the scene. This is what fraternize means to Josephus. It's the use of it. It doesn't mean befriend. It means get close enough to kill quietly with a dagger. Yeah? On the following day, at the 5th hour, having come to Gabaroth, I found the entire plain in front of the village filled with armed soldiers from the Galilee, on hand for the alliance, just as I had charged them. In fact, another large crowd from the villages was also accumulating. Now, he's put in a couple of words in here which you have to... He told them how to come. Come armed, but also with 3 days of supplies of your own, right? We're not going to loot from our own villages. You're not going to come to Gabroth and take the food from the villages. Come with your own food. Come with your own food, right? They're not our enemies. We're living in their town. Let's not act like ruffians, right? When I had situated myself among them, I began to speak. They were all shouting, calling me patron and rescuer, savior of their country. Yet, I, after acknowledging with gratitude that I had toward them, counseled them neither to make war against anyone, nor to dirty their hands by plunder, but to camp down in the plain, and to be content with their own travel provisions. For I said I wanted to quell the disturbances without bloodshed. I'm a man of peace. I'm a man of peace. I've now gathered 8,000 armed people who are loyal to me, to make peace. I don't want to have any trouble here. Now, on that very day, it happened that the men who had been sent to the Jonathanites with the letters ran into the guards posted by me on the roads. Oops! The men were guarded at the sites as I had charged. After perusing these documents filled with slanders and lies, but indicating these matters to no one, I made my plans to move against Johannes' force. So now he's holding in his hands documents that it wasn't just that these documents said, oh, we vote against Josephus, we vote for Jonathan of Giscala. What these documents were slanders about things that he had done, right? Corrupt things that he had done. So now he has their lies in writing in his hands. Right? And but they don't know he has it, right? And this is, his maneuver. When John's group heard about my arrival, they gathered up all their own, along with Annas, and withdrew to the house of Jesus, different Jesus, right? This was, I don't know if you remember this, there was a Jesus who departed from Josephus and went to Jerusalem at one point, who was hostile to Josephus and had said very negative things about him, right? They went to the house of that Jesus. This was a castle and not inferior at all to an acropolis. Acropolis was really a fortified tower that was the last holdout very often in a city when people were defending a city. So this is a powerful structure. In this place, then, they concealed an ambushed detachment of armed soldiers, locked up all the other gates, leaving only one open, and invited me to come in off the road to greet them. They gave clear orders to the armed soldiers to permit only me to go in when I arrived, while shutting out the others, for in this way they imagined that I would easily be at their mercy. But they were deceived by the hope. Having detected the plot beforehand, I pretended to go to sleep opposite them, as if I had put up for the night after arriving on the road. So they're in this castle-like building, right? It's guarded with walls. One gate is open, and Josephus is supposed to, sit down and chat with them there. Instead, Josephus sets up his camp with his tent and everything else, right? And they're watching him very carefully from where he is, right? Mm-hmm. And he's stretching, yawning, right? Brushes his teeth, washes up, right? Puts on his sleeping clothes, goes to bed, closes his tent. Good schluff, right? Mm-hmm. And they're watching this from not far away, right? Johannes' group, supposing that I was really resting and fast asleep, rushed down to the mob to change their minds, as though I were performing badly as a general. Yet the opposite happened to them, for when they appeared immediately, there was a shout from the Galileans expressing goodwill towards me as a general. They were placing blame on Jonathan's group. Here they, the delegates, were, without themselves having first suffered anything bad, yet having thrown their Galileans' affairs into turmoil. So the Galileans are saying, what are you doing here? To the Jerusalemites. We're okay. What, are you trying to stir things up? They kept appealing them to leave, for they would never have their minds changed, to receive another protector in place of me. When these things had been reported to me, I guess he wasn't really sleeping, reported to me, I did not hesitate to go out into the fray. I went down immediately so that I could hear what Jonathan's group would say. When I came forward, there was an immediate applause accompanied by shouts of praise and adulation from the entire mob, who confessed their gratitude to my generalship. As they heard these things, Jonathan's group began to fear that they were in danger of being killed by the Galileans, should the Galileans rush upon them out of gratitude towards me. They were contemplating a sprint. Not being able to leave, however, because I required them to stay, they stood looking downward during my speech. Then I ordered the mob to restrain their adulation and posted the most trusted of the armed soldiers by the roads in order to patrol, so that Jonathan would not attack us, his other troops. Unexpectedly, I also exhorted the Galileans to pick up their weapons so that they would not be disturbed at the approach of any enemy soldiers if someone should appear suddenly. To begin with, I reminded Jonathan's group about the letter, how they had written that they had been sent by the General Assembly of the Jerusalemites to resolve my struggle with Johannes, and how they had invited me to come to them. While relating these things, I held the letter out in the middle, so that they could not deny anything. The document exposing them. Yeah. Quote, here's the speech. Now look, I declared, if while being judged in relation to Jonathan, I had brought some 2 or 3 gentlemen as witnesses, with a view of marshalling a defense of my own life, you and your fellow envoys would face the obvious necessity after examining also the lives of such men. So this is a very important idea, is that in the Roman and Greek justice system, character played as big a role as evidence did. That is to say, you could make a judgment that could such a person do such a thing? If he is of such high moral character, would he ever do something so lowly? So the first part of a defense in a Roman or a Greek court would be to prove the character witnesses, we call them, of the individual. And that carried tremendous weight. So he's describing this right now, right? I had brought some 2 or 3 gentlemen as witnesses with a view to marshalling the defense of my own life. You and your fellow envoys would face the obvious necessity after examining also the lives of these men. After all, if they're character witnesses, what's their character? To acquit me of the charges. So in order that you may know that I have acted honorably throughout the Galilee, I consider even 3 witnesses to my having lived honorably to be too few. Instead, I give you all of these 8,000 armed men. Right? All of these, right? I give you all of these. So discover from these the manner in which I have lived, whether I have conducted affairs here with all dignity and virtue. Right? By the way, dignity and virtue are very key words again for this, right? Is because the Romans put a great deal of value in these 2 qualities, as opposed to the Greeks, who put a great deal of value into intellect, into talent, into sort of other qualities. The Romans were into the term that we often use today, which is actually a Roman word, is gravitas. They're like serious people, right? We don't care if you're a good playwright. Are you a serious person? Are you a committed person? Are you a virtuous person? Now, interestingly enough, these were actually qualities of the Jews, right? That they were not big entertainers, that they were very serious about living life appropriately. So he said, here in all dignity and all virtue, and certainly the Galileans, I bind you with an oath to conceal nothing of the truth, but to speak to these men as jurors. You are my jury, right? So you speak to them with that way, and I bind you to tell them the exact truth. If there's anything I have not done honorably. While I was still saying these things, there were numerous voices from all sides calling me the patron, the rescuer, the savior. Concerning what had been done, they were giving testimony, and concerning what remained to be done, they were appealing for more. They all swore that I had preserved the women unmolested, and that they had never been harmed by me in any way. So this is like out of left field. What's this about the women? All right. Generally speaking, officers, generals, governors, could have their pick of the women in the area in which they governed, they were dictators, right? And they would just take them, right? Soldiers would also do this, in rape
Even
and stuff
Jews.
like that, right?
Even Jews.
Apparently, it could happen. Right? But certainly what they're saying is, I didn't do this.
They did it.
Right?
They did it.
But his point is not that. They were dealing with Romans, stuff like that. You're accusing me of tremendous slanders. There's tremendous slanders going on about how corrupt I am and how I take for myself. I didn't. You remember, Moshe says the same thing. Samuel says the same. Whose goat did I steal? Whose donkey did I take? Right? What's going on here? Right? So I'm falsely accused. Right? And I want to state one of the tests of the virtue of a person who has 100% power is he's not satisfying his appetites at his whim and taking that which is not his. Specifically women in this situation. So he's saying that's part of the evidence. Find me somebody who will claim that I molested one woman.
Right.
You won't find it. After this, I read out to the Galileans 2 of the letters that had been sent by Jonathan's group, just in case they were getting too calm, right? Which the men I had stationed as patrolmen had seized and dispatched to me, filled with slanders and fabrications, that I was exercising more of a tyranny than a generalship over them. He included many other things in addition to these, omitting nothing of shameful falsehood. I led on to the mob that I had received the documents after they had willingly been given over by their couriers, because they did not want my opponents to know about the patrols that were arresting their people as they walked out. Or they might become anxious and refrain from writing any more letters. He's collecting all of their correspondence. This is like Mark Antony, right? These are honorable men, right? Look what they write. These are their words. Right? When the mob heard these things, they became utterly furious. They rushed against Ianthus and those present with him, as though they would destroy them. They would have concluded the deed, except that I managed to still the Galileans' rage, right, to the group. I declared that I would pardon what they had already done, if they would now change their thinking. Go back to their native city, Jerusalem, and tell those that had sent them the truth about my conduct of affairs. When I had said these things, I dismissed them, though I knew full well that they would do nothing of what they had promised. The mob was incited to rage over them, and they appealed to me to authorize them to punish the insolent men. By every possible means I began persuading them to spare the men, for I understood all sedition to be ruinous. Right? He's saying that to kill our own people, especially some of the nobility of Jerusalem, even if I'm in the right, would have been absolutely ruinous to the Jewish state. I understood all forms of sedition to be ruinous in its effects on the community. But the mob kept the rage towards them unmitigated, and they all rushed upon the house in which Ianthus' group were being led. When I realized that the rush was unstoppable, I leapt up onto a horse and ordered the mobs to follow me to Sogani, a village 20 furlongs away from Gabara. By making use of this maneuver, I provided a way for me to avoid seeming to initiate a civil war. So, just to let you know what's happened is that he was, I didn't explain this earlier, his enemies were in Gabara, he was down here, Japhthia. He went around north of Gabara and came back through Sogini, which we're seeing now mentioned again. There was a valley, and he popped up out of the valley outside the northern gates of Gabara, which he didn't go into, right? They opened that gate for him. He didn't go into it, right? And he was posed outside. Now, in the middle of the riot, he's saying he ordered them to go back around the north to Sogani, a village 20 furlongs away from Gabara. By making use of this, I avoided the war. Okay, so we're going to hold very soon, but we'll just see what he says here. When I came near Sagani, I halted the mob, and after delivering an exhortation about not being carried away abruptly by feelings of rage, in this case involving irreparable acts of punishment, I ordered 100 men who were already advanced in age, and principals among them, to prepare to travel to the city of the Jerusalemites. Now, he's going to go appeal to the mass of people in Jerusalem, right? To place the blame on the citizenry for generating factions in the region. And should they be moved by your words, I declared, appeal to the General Assembly, not the clique, to write to me, directing me to remain in the Galilee, and Jonathan's group to withdraw from there. After I had given them these instructions, and they had quickly prepared themselves on the third day after the assembly, I held the farewell, sending along 500 armed soldiers. So he's taken his elderly people and using them as shluchim, as ambassadors, but protecting them with 500 of his young soldiers. Right? Moreover, I wrote to friends in Samaria that they should provide safe passage for them, because in order to get quickly from the Galilee to Jerusalem, you have to go through Samaria. That's the fastest route. Right? That they should provide safe passage for them. For Samaria was already subject to the Romans, and it was absolutely necessary for anyone who wanted to go quickly to proceed through that region. From the Galilee, it was possible in this way to be resting in Jerusalem within 3 days. I myself accompanied the envoys to the border of the Galilee, setting up guards on the roads, so that it would not be easy for someone to notice those who were escaping. When I had done these things, I made my residence in Jaffa. So he pretty well, they were up here, right? And he was sending them down to Jerusalem, right? So he went with them down to around here, and then came back and settled here while they were going down to Jerusalem, right? Okay, so that's where I made my residence. Having failed miserably in their venture with me, Ionis group dismissed Jonas to Giscala. They sent him home to the far north, which is probably about 50, 60 kilometers away, as they themselves proceeded to the city of the Tiberians, fully expecting to have it at their mercy. Now remember, Tiberias, right, is a city again, with its own set of loyalties. For at about this time, Jesus had written to them, announcing that he would persuade the mob to welcome them when they came. This is the same Jesus that we saw earlier in the other place, right? So he's like their forward guy, trying to prepare. So far he hasn't done very well. Whereas they, the Johannes group, departed with such hopes, Silas, whom I had left in charge of Tiberias, as I said, reported these things to me through letters and requested me to hurry there. I obliged him quickly, and by being present there, exposed myself to the risk of destruction for the following reasons. And we'll hold here. Okay?
All right.
So he's managed to diffuse the enemy efforts without actually having to attack anybody. Just really humiliating them in a sense. And they're broken into pieces at this point, right? John of Giscala has gone home with his people, probably his 3,000 people, and the Jerusalemites are trying to find a comfortable place to, settle in as they're going to head out. But it may not turn out as they see fit. What?
It's so familiar.
It's so familiar? I know. It is. It's watching. When you think about for a moment, and I know that I end on the same tone each day, but you're seeing brilliant maneuvers going on, right? Very clever, right? Mm-hmm. The Romans are, marching towards Israel at this point, in large numbers. That's going on in the background of all of this. They're coming through Syria, coming in.